Hi, I'm Father Michael Orsi. I'm your host for Action for Life Television, that good news program that brings you the big G, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and the little g, all the good things that people do to put that gospel of life into action. Well, today we're going to talk about a topic that oftentimes we don't hear too much about. We hear a lot about the harm that abortion does to babies. Well, that's a no-brainer. We've also talked in the past about the great harm that abortion does to the woman who has the abortion. Sometimes not immediately, but oftentimes down the road. Those memories of that life snuffed out wreak havoc in the mind and heart and soul of the woman who had the abortion. Now, as you know, I'm a Catholic priest, and I hear confessions. And I will tell you, there are a number of women who come to confession many, many years later, shedding tears, sobbing over what they did 20, 30, or even 40 years ago. So we know those stories, and we've dealt with them in the past on this program. However, what we don't often hear about is the effect that an abortion might have on the father of the child that was aborted. And we decided that today we would dedicate a program to talk about those fathers. We have two wonderful gentlemen here today who belong to an organization called Expectant Fathers without voices. Elliott Cohn, welcome. You are the executive president. Yes?
I am the president, yes.
You don't want to be an executive president.
I can be if you'd like me to be.
Okay, you're it. You're it. And we have the manager here, Terrence.
Yes, sir. Terrence Mitchell. Pleasure to meet you, sir.
It's a pleasure to have you with us, too. Okay. Now, let's talk about, Elliott, let's talk about your involvement. How did you get involved in this ministry?
I suffered 2 abortions in my lifetime. When I say I suffered them, some people, or some ladies or some people might scratch their head and say, "What do you mean you suffered, 2 abortions? You're a man, you can't have an abortion." But that's not necessarily true. Like when a woman is expecting a child, she's an expectant mother. When a father is expecting a child, especially when it's a planned pregnancy, he is an expectant father. And unfortunately, these expectant fathers have no voice whatsoever legally to take any action whatsoever to save their children if the mother, whether it's their girlfriend, whether it's their wife, it doesn't matter. They have, if the woman is abortion-minded and the man is not, the man's left with really nothing to do but to plead with her and enter into, for lack of a better term, hostage negotiations and just say, just please, don't do this. And these are the reasons why.
So I want to ask you a question, though. All right, I was reading your little bio.
Okay.
And you said that the abortions that affected you were due to planned pregnancies. All right. Explain that to moi, because if it was planned, who planned it and then who unplanned it?
In the first situation, we were engaged to be married. Mm-hmm. We were living together. And we decided that we were ready for that step. We mutually decided to stop using any form of birth control or anything like that. She and I made that decision together. And apparently somewhere along the way, not due to any of the typical things, there was no arguing, there was no lack of financial support, there was no lack of family support, there was both sides of the family were happy about it. You know, that our parents were going to be grandparents, our grandparents were going to be great-grandparents, so it's wonderful. Everybody's super happy. And then there was the miscarriage. She told me the sad news one day. I came home from work, and she says, Elliott, I have some sad news. I've had a miscarriage. And I was obviously sad about that. And I told her that everything would be okay, and that, could she, maybe tell me some details and how did it happen and so on and so forth. And she wasn't really very forthcoming with some of those details. That being said, I just figured that she was, in shock, or, she had been through something really emotional. Maybe she just didn't want to talk about it too much, so I thought, okay, give her some time. So I gave her some time, and I started realizing that she was living her life like everything was totally normal and fine. And I was grieving a lot. And this was when I still believed it and thought it to be a miscarriage. Eventually, I got a phone call from the young lady who had originally introduced us, and she says, Elliott, I have some difficult news that I need to tell you. She said, your fiance, she didn't have a miscarriage. She had an abortion, and she made me swear not to tell you or anyone. She, girl code is what she called it. She said, she made me swear not to tell, but I just can't carry this around with me anymore. She said, you deserve to know. When I got home that night, I discussed it with her. She denied it at first, and then eventually, very loudly and proudly, and this is the scary part, very loudly and proudly proclaimed, and I won't use the language that she used, but she said a lot of profanities, and she basically said, you're blank, 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 blank right that I had an abortion, and I would do it again.
Wow. Woo. Like Elliott, this is like blowing my mind, because you really didn't, not only didn't you know what she did, you really
I got blindsided.
You didn't know her.
Well, apparently not. I didn't, we'd known each other for several years, so I thought I knew her very well. When you said that when it seemed like I didn't really know her, I genuinely feel that she was possessed. When she told me that it was an abortion, and when she told me, the way that she did, I broke down in tears. I was crying. I was, couldn't understand why anybody would make that decision. I just was crying. I literally was on the floor crying, asking her why, just tell me why. And she sounded different. I don't mean like a movie like The Exorcist or something, but she sounded different, she looked different, and she was taunting me. She was saying things that my beloved fiance would never say to me. That's why I say possessed, or there must have been some sort of an evil or a demon inside her, because she was saying things like, oh, what happened? You're such a poor little baby. Did you lose your little baby? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Wait.
It's pretty bad.
It does sound like she was possessed.
Yeah.
It does. She acted in ways contrary to the person that you thought she was, and then she teased you, taunted you. With very hurtful and personally to you.
Told me I wasn't even a man because I was crying. She said, real men don't cry.
All right, let's we're going to go off. Folks, just bear with me here, because this is something that I haven't dealt with in the past either. But maybe we have to say something about it. Terrence, possession. Possession by a demon. You have any experience with that in dealing with people with abortions? The evil one come in. What do you think?
I think that, like I was saying before, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. The spirit hates the flesh, and the flesh wages war against the spirit. And when you've got people who are living in the flesh, they're not operating by the spirit. So anything that's contrary to the will of God will be rewarded in the earthly realms. And I think that people oftentimes are susceptible to demonic possession in the guise of things that look good earthly. If you look at the way that the enemy tempted Jesus, bow down to me and I'll give you all of this. And I think people oftentimes get tempted by that, and they're seduced by lustful things. And what is the ultimate lust is male female sexuality, sensuality. And if a baby was conceived but there was no love on her part, again, I don't know her, so I can't speak on her behalf, but that's the ultimate level of we're all spirit. We are not our bodies. We are not our flesh. We are spirit that possesses a body.
Terrence, I often had this feeling. I'd go to prayerfully protest Planned Parenthood. And somehow there were certain times with certain people that I just got a sick feeling that it was demonic. There was a woman there who they considered to be an escort. And we were saying the Hail Mary, and she was mocking us in our prayers. And it sounded just like a witch, just like a witch. And you just got the creeps. And I think, folks, as I said, I could do a whole show on this, and probably we will maybe someday do a show on demonic possession and how I believe that the abortion industry is an industry that has been used by the evil one. And I wouldn't be surprised that in Elliott's case, that his fiancée, his girlfriend, had opened herself up to evil, which in the first place allowed for her to have an abortion, something that was not certainly in the couple's mindset. No, and then later on to act in a way that was, she was acting like an evil person, like a witch.
It's contrary to the will of God, but be sure of this: God shall not be mocked. The Bible says it'd be better for a person to have a millstone cast around his neck and be thrown into the sea than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. And conception starts in the womb. So if somebody is affected and infected by Luciferian energy, the hardest part of my Christian walk is praying for my enemies, because I know that in my spirit, I can't reduce myself to their level of negativity. I have to be able to take the high road and rise above that. But that, for me, is the most challenging.
And you see, folks, what Terrence is saying is absolutely right. We can't hate those people that oppose us. What we have to do is pray for them. I could remember, as I said, outside of Planned Parenthood, that escort mocking our prayers. Now,
that was the first time that I started actually really praying and acknowledging.
Yeah, so you saw something, you said, this is...
And that too, Pastor, Father, to interject, not to interrupt, that's why this movement is so important, because so many times men are pitted against women, that blacks are pitted against whites, and you're either pro-abortion or you're pro-life. And it's not about opposition. It's about saying, listen, I need to have a voice in this. I need to say that the baby growing inside of you is not just yours. First of all, it's not property, but we've been legislated in the Constitution to believe that the 14th Amendment authorizes personal autonomy, self-government over what's growing inside of her body, her choice. But that body would not be having a growing fetus inside of it if it weren't for the men's contribution. And sometimes the dad doesn't want the abortion. And we need to have power when we speak. We need to have authority when we speak, and that comes from up above.
As you can imagine, producing this wonderful program, Action for Life, it costs a great deal of money. We're going to need your help. So if you would like to donate to keep this good news program on the air, please go to your computer, your cell phone, actionforlife.net. And now for our thought for the day. Prayer is extremely important. We're not fighting a battle just against earthly powers. we're fighting a battle against evil. Please take some time each day to pray and ask God for the strength that you need and that we need to keep up the battle for life. Let's talk about, you're also a victim of a second abortion.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes,
what, is this with the same woman?
No.
The second time, it was not up to, it was not left up to her. I'm going to try and say this as nicely as possible. Her obsessed alcoholic father thought that it would bring shame on the family if she were to have a child out of wedlock. And the way he decided to solve this was to grab her, throw her in the car, and take her to an abortion clinic and basically force her to have one. So she was gone. So that was 2008. 2018, 10 years later, she contacts me and says, Elliott, I've got something that I need to tell you. And she told me the whole horrible, gruesome story of how everything happened and, what her father, literally forcibly made her do. As a result, she can no longer have children.
Now you get involved with this group, Expectant Fathers.
Well, I had a cancer scare in the latter half of 2019, and I was on bed rest for several months, and I had nothing but time to think. So the way that I coped with these situations was to just throw myself into my work. I'm a full-time musician, so I stayed on the road as much as I could. I stayed booked as much as I could. I played as many shows as I could possibly play. I recorded studio sessions. I just threw myself in. I became like a workaholic. That was my form of coping. But when I had that cancer scare and I had to just lay in bed for months and it's just me and God and time to pray. And by this point in my life, I had become a Christian.
But you said
I gave my life to Christ. So.
Yeah, in your bio, you talked about that you were in the music industry,
Yes.
and you said it's kind of filled with left-wing ideologues. And
Absolutely, yes. I would say not only left-wing, but I would go so far as to say Luciferian.
Luciferian.
Yes.
Once again, folks, we're coming, in contact once again with this whole idea of evil and how evil works. And what you're telling me, that in the entertainment industry, that Satan seems to have a foothold.
Big time.
Big time.
Big time.
Talk a little bit about that, and then we're
Big
gonna,
time.
and then we're going to have the manager here talk about how we combat that. Go ahead.
Okay. The music industry is one that is definitely all about the things that the enemy would want us to glorify. Self, pride. Look at me, look how great I am, buy my album, look how beautiful I am, look how handsome I am, so on and so forth. And it's driven by money, it's driven by greed, it's driven by all of the things that that we know that the enemy likes to use to tempt us and things like that. Being a part of that industry, I never fell prey to those ideals, but I was aware of them. I didn't feel like I could speak about my abortion experiences because the few times that I did try to talk about it with some of my, other people in the music industry, I got shut down real quick, saying, what are you even talking about? This isn't even this is a woman's rights issue. This has nothing to do with fathers or men. Come on, And so when I was on bed rest and I had nothing but time to think and pray, I knew that I had to start at least a support group for men that had gone through situations like
because of your illness,
mine. Yeah.
you had some time to think these things through. And I said, you said, I have to do something to help other people.
Right.
And this is the beginning then of your organization.
Of Expectant Fathers Without Voices, yes. And it started out as a support group, and then very quickly, the more research I did, I realized, wow, this needs to be way more than just a support group for grieving men or grieving expectant fathers. And I'd like to define what an expectant father is. That's not just any any man running around out there. An expectant father is a man who genuinely wants to be a father, who wants to raise that child, who wants to take care of that woman. You know, even if for some reason the two don't stay together, you know, as a couple, at a bare minimum, you know, since our organization does advocate for legal rights, that's what we're pushing for, is for legal rights for expectant fathers. And in order to do that, we need to be very careful and make sure that you know, if those laws were to be passed, you know, that can't be exploited by, you know, evil men, bad men.
Okay, Terrence, how does your organization get word out about what you folks do? And then how do you promote legislation for expectant fathers, that they have rights too?
Well, I'll answer the second part of your question first to make the whole thing make sense, at least in terms of how I go about promotion beyond just a modality level. I think that it's important to define who we are not. And in the process of doing that, we give, like I said, the voice to the voiceless, but we also need to make sure that when you're looking at legislation, that we create equal protections for all three people, okay? Mm-hmm. So that just as the mother has rights because she physically is carrying the child, we can identify through paternity that the child that's growing inside of her is actually his. That should give both of them equal parenting rights, equal parenting powers. I think that it's critically important to understand that there are, to use murder, basically is what it is, murdering a child as a method of contraception, should not be legalized. Mm-hmm. It certainly shouldn't be subsidized.
And certainly not glorified.
And not glorified. And I think that part of that would come from changing awareness and creating awareness for what we're saying, and changing the mindset that is not about Roe v. Wade, which was hijacked and turned into something that it really isn't. I think that within the school system, within the judicial system, we've been hijacked mm-hmm. for an agenda. And rather than go against the narrative, simply speak the true narrative.
Okay, how do you get guys to join your organization? What do? You go out to different places, you talk, you put up signs, you go on the internet. What do you do?
All of the above.
All of the above.
All of the above, yeah.
So suppose somebody wants to get in touch with you. Like, here's your big chance now. This program reaches planet-wide.
Okay. Well, you would go to www.efwv.net. That's our website. You can also, and from the website, you can find our Facebook page and our Twitter and so on.
You've heard the stories here, these testimonies. You heard what this organization can do for expectant fathers without voices, but they do have a place to go, all right? Pass this word on to men who you might think have or are suffering from abortion. Now, I promised I would tell you a story with a happy ending, a little bit different from your story. All right, here's the story. Had a wonderful doctor in my parish. I'm going to give you his name because it should be blasted out all over the world. Sam Nuziello. Dr. Sam came from a place called Chicago. He had his practice there, and a young girl went to see him one day, and she said that she wasn't feeling very well. So he examined her. She must have been about 16, 17 years old. And he said, "Honey, you're pregnant." And she says, "My father will kill me." So, who was her father? Well, he was the local Don, a member of the Godfather's family. This is a true story, folks. Wow. This is true, absolutely true. So she says, "No, I have to have an abortion. I have to have an abortion." He said, "No, you will not have an abortion, and your father will not kill you. Now go home and tell your father." Well, the doctor had a suspicion that the girl was not going to be able to tell her father. And that night, after he left his office, he visited the home of the young girl, and he asked to see her father. And he sat down with the old Don, and he told him that his daughter was pregnant. And the old Don went ballistic. "I'll kill her! I'll kill her!" The doctor said, "No, Don Corleone, you will not kill her. She's bringing your grandchild into the world." The old Don calmed down, and a tear came down his eye, and he said, "You're right. You're right. I want the baby." Many years later, the old Don died, and the doctor went to the funeral home, and after he paid his respects, he saw the mother of the girl who was supposed to be aborted. And she was talking to a pretty young girl, maybe 20 years old. And she was pointing over to the doctor. The young girl went over to the doctor and said, "Doctor, I want to thank you. It's because of you that I'm alive today. I'm the baby whose life you saved." And she kissed him.
Wow.
You see, all of us have a contribution to make in the cause of life. The doctor went above and beyond the call of duty. The old Don had a heart, and a beautiful young girl came into the world and never forgot the story her mother told her about Dr. Sam Nuziello. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today. I know you're for action, and I hope you are too. We would like to thank our generous sponsors for their wonderful support. Thanks for watching. Please join us next time for Action for Life. I'm for action, and I hope you are too. I'm Father Michael Orsi. I am your host for Action for Life Television, that good news program which talks about the gospel of Jesus Christ, the big G, and the little g, all the good things that people are doing to put the gospel of life into action. So please join us for the next episode of Action for Life.